Anji, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Okay, so very quickly, I want to go through the syllabus points that we're left with. Um, Hamdi, Alhamdulillah, we've covered the main part of this topic. Now, what we're left with is basically just a theoretical portion, and that is given in terms of a lot of text. In terms of the textbook, जो आपकी green वाली है federal वाली textbook, उसमें तो it's quite overwhelming. And I would actually not recommend. But if you're very interested in reading the text of that portion, which includes your deforestation, pollution, and all of that stuff, you can use the Brad Phil publication textbook. आप लोगों के लिए आसानी मैं ये करूँगा. I will share the notes that one of my students made in a very good handwriting and bullet points for all of those notes. However, what I will do is I will go through those topics in terms of the past paper questions, since always मेरी जो कोशिश है वो यही रही है कि I go in the form of in terms of the past papers. So what I'm going to do is, you can see I made a folder which basically has these subtopics and their questions that the way they have been appearing in the recent past papers. So we're going to skim through their mark schemes and examiner reports and the questions. Almost more than 70 or 80% of what we're going to do is an overlap with what you've done in geography already. I'm sure you know what you, on also chemistry. I'm sure you know what deforestation is. I'm sure you know the idea of recycling, water pollution, eutrophication, and all of that stuff. Needless to say that we're going to skim through this. It does not mean okay, all of this stuff is not important. It does appear in the exam. All of these questions that I'm showing you are from past papers, telling you. So Bismillah, let's quickly begin. So the first question is, describe the consequences of deforestation. In your syllabus, you're not supposed to know what is deforestation. You're supposed to know the consequences, the results of deforestation. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's a 6-marker question. It says describe. So it's description that is required. So let's look at the mark schemes together. All right. So deforestation की वजह से क्या क्या होता है. So you can clearly see that there are 1 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 points that they've given. Okay, so inshallah, let's go through them quickly and understand what are the consequences of deforestation. So of course, as it's obvious from the name, the word deforestation means that we're cutting down on trees. So the first point that you can see is fewer trees. Okay, because of deforestation, there are fewer trees. And of course, if there are fewer trees, then there is less photosynthesis. And if there is less photosynthesis, what follows is that less carbon dioxide is absorbed and more carbon dioxide remains in water. And as you know, that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and that gives a global warming effect. But देखें जो पहले 5 point हैं, they're actually related. It's just a cascade of points, one after the other. And they're giving you 5 marks. Okay. Or I'm sorry, kitchen में कोई बर्तन गिरा है जिसकी आवाज I'm sure कि आपको भी आई होगी, but never mind. Okay, so and of course, if less photosynthesis is happening, then look at the next point. Less oxygen produced, or less oxygen की वजह से जो consequences हैं, that eventually will result in destruction of habitats at the end of the day. I mean, less oxygen will eventually cause the species to be destroyed. Or destruction of habitats generally. When you're cutting down on trees, you're actually destroying the natural habitats. And also, it results in the loss of soil stability. When you're taking out the trees, जब आप trees को उखाड़ रहे हैं, you're plucking them out, that actually causes loss of soil stability. And of course, since the trees and the plants, they are involved with water in one way or the other, lack of trees will of course affect the water cycle. Water cycle हमारे syllabus में नहीं है, but of course, since it affects, so deforestation has a consequence of water cycle, so you can mention that as a point. Adverse effects on a recreation value of forests, effect on local human population, and medicinal value of plant species. So you can clearly see ये topic ऐसे ही syllabus में है. Describe the consequences, और ये आपके पास, you have a pool of points that you can learn and frame in sentences for your answer. So let me read the exam report. It says some good responses were given here. Although most candidates focus their answers on the human effects, few mention the effect of the reduction in photosynthesis and the consequences of higher levels of carbon dioxide. Even fewer made mention of water cycle. Excuse me. Okay, चलें जी, अगली बात है conservation की. Now, what exactly is conservation? If you look at the word, there is a need on Earth at the moment that some species are at the verge of becoming extinct. So unko hame conserve karna. We need to conserve them. So the question is, discuss reasons for the conservation of species with reference to the management of fisheries. So conservation, not in general, but in terms of management of fisheries. Okay. Okay. So just give me 1 second, please. Maji? Okay. So let's look at the reasons for conservation in terms of again, it's a क्या कहते हैं, 4-mark question and it's discussion. Okay, they've given you 7 points. Sorry, 8 points. अच्छा जी, to maintain food stocks of that species, farming, maintaining a particular species. आपको पता है कि फिशिंग के साथ जो है वो कुछ लोगों की जॉब्स वगैरह भी जो है वो they're actually related, so it provides employment for financial benefit. And then reference to maintenance of biodiversity. What is biodiversity? The word bio basically means, I'm talking about this word. So the word biodiversity means bio ka word hai, that means living. So there is a variety of living. I mean, if you're not conserving, species, then you're actually letting the variety finish. So it is in that context that they're saying the maintenance of biodiversity. Reduction in overfishing of particular species in the wild that prevents extinction, for restocking natural populations, sustainability, continuity of availability of supply. Some good answers were seen, but weaker candidates found it difficult to relate the management of fisheries to conservation. असल में ना conservation as a general concept नहीं है. It's in the context of management of fisheries. How do you manage, the species of fish in particular? It's in that context. Okay, so try and stick around these points. You can go through your textbook. It will give you points. Even the notes that I share will give you points. But again, try and stick around these points. All right. The next thing is, okay. Another, and you will be surprised when you look at the syllabus points, exactly syllabus points jaise hi pure questions hain jo unhone puche hain, and these are from the recent papers. Okay, so if you look at this is October-November 2019. It's a 7-marker question. It says, describe the possible harmful effects of human activity on the ecosystem of a tropical rainforest. Tropical region of the earth, let me draw. So for example, if that's the earth, जो इसका इक्वेटर है, which is the center portion, इक्वेटर के 10 kilometers ऊपर और 10 kilometers नीचे, 10 kilometers above and 10 kilometers below, this area is the tropical region. और इसको we call them as the lungs of the world also, because यहाँ पे सबसे ज़्यादा trees हैं और variety and all that stuff. So what they're saying is, describe the possible harmful effects of human activity on the ecosystem of a tropical rainforest. Okay, and it's a 7-marker question. So let's look at the answer. Human activity say the harm that is being done to the tropical rainforest is, number one, deforestation. We've discussed that, which of course results in soil erosion, flooding, and landsliding. Desertification, which basically means less rainfall, which can be because of drought and all of that stuff. Then, of course, if you're cutting down on trees, that means loss of habitat, which eventually means that there is extinction happening. Now, I want you to notice that they've underlined so many words here, which means that you are supposed to use these words when you're explaining all of this explanation, even if in your own words, okay? Extinction, loss of species, of course, जो endangered species है उन्हीं की ज़्यादा tension होती है कि extinct हो जाएंगे. We call those species as endangered, the ones that are prone to extinction, okay? And the loss of biodiversity, that's a key word that I just explained earlier, that basically means variety of life, your species, whatever you call it, species. ठीक है. Okay, loss of potential medicines. Since plants are basically used as a raw material in medicinal research, so that's also one of the harm that humans themselves are causing to the tropical rainforest in terms of losing potential medicines, because medicines at the end of the day, they do come from plants, majority of them. फिर डिफॉरेस्टेशन की वजह से कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड इंक्रीज हो रही है. आप देख रहे हैं कि majority of these points are a mixture of air pollution, consequences of deforestation, and so on and so forth. Number 8, their greenhouse it gives us a greenhouse effect, which basically means it's greenhouse gases हैं जो कि कुछ atmosphere में when they gather in the atmosphere, that increase the temperature, which causes the climate change, of course. And of course, this also affects the food chain. You know, we've studied food chain, and trees and plants, they happen to be at the first trophic level. If you're at mass level, you know, removing them, then that of course affects the food chain, and that affects the local people living in that habitat, and that releases many gases like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides, which can cause acid rain. Okay. And that acid rain can also damage trees. I mean, apart from the fact that we're destroying them because of deforestation, this is also an effect. इसकी हम जरा जल्दी से examiner report भी देखते हैं. Those candidates that were able to correctly identify deforestation as human activity and were then able to go on to describe the possible effects of this gain significant credit. देखिए, question को समझने की कोशिश करें. The question was fairly simple, and it was, let me go back to the question. The question was, describe the possible harmful effects of human activity on the ecosystem of a tropical rainforest. इसमें देखिए, humans के जो harmful effect हैं पूरे tropical on the entire ecosystem. So those harmful effects can include all of the harmful effects: the air pollution, the water pollution, the effects of deforestation. So this is a very dynamic question, if you like, that covers all of the aspects. ठीक है, इसकी हम examiner report पढ़ रहे थे. So let me read that again. Please follow carefully. Those candidates that were able to correctly identify deforestation as a human activity and were then able to go on to describe the possible harmful effects of this gained significant credit. Some responses did not refer specifically to the rainforests, with some candidates referring instead to melting of polar ice. Polar ice की हम बात यहाँ पे क्यों नहीं कर रहे? I mean, that is a cause, but the point is the question was specifying tropical rainforests, so we can't bring in the polar regions. References to acid rain and its effects and to the specific effects of human activity on the local human population of rainforests were less frequently seen. Excuse me. Some candidates made incorrect reference to the ozone layer, and others provided lengthy but irrelevant answers based upon pollution of water or pollution in general. Of course, it was in the context of tropical rainforests. Let's look at the second part of this question. It says, the sun is the principal source of energy in an ecosystem, such as tropical rainforest. Outline the flow of energy through an ecosystem, such as a tropical rainforest. In your answer, you should make reference to the named levels in the food webs. It's just a 3-marker question. Like in this question, is important. They're asking you to outline the flow of energy. And you know that the energy is non-cyclic, it's lost and all of that stuff. And it says in your answer, you should make reference to named levels in the food webs. So the answer is very simple. The first thing is it's non-cyclic. सबसे पहले producer है, उसके साथ plant का आपने जरूर mention करना है, because we know that the producers are plants, they photosynthesize, light's converted into chemical energy. Then you have the primary consumers. Look, they've underlined consumers / carnivore / herbivore. And you have decomposers because they do decompose, and energy is lost and it's not not all is passed on. Remember the 90 and the 10% that we discussed. Okay, so this is basically what the question was all about. चलिए जी आगे चलते हैं. Recycling. Okay, again, ये recent papers में भी आया है. Again, recycling का concept is very simple. I mean, why do we recycle things? That's basically just to make sure that we're conserving the resources. So आपका syllabus भी कहता है, exactly syllabus वाला point उठा के उसने दे दिया, with reference to named examples, describe reasons for recycling materials. I mean, why do we need to recycle? So you can use any examples given in the textbook. But for example, paper key example, a classical example, a glass key example is a classical example. So let's look at the, it's a 5 marker question, okay, that they've given. Let's look at the mark scheme. So making scarce resource last longer. ठीक है, जो resource थोड़ा है, we want to ensure that it lasts longer. That's the reason why we want to do recycling. And then an example is paper plus reduction in deforestation. We know that paper is coming from trees. Okay, so that's directly related to less deforestation, a reduction in deforestation. Also glass slash metal, we need to conserve that also. Why? Because uski production requires less energy than new production, because new production requires a lot of energy. Okay, अगर हम उसको recycle और glass को recycle usually आपको पता है वो किस तरह करते हैं, they melt the glass and then they can reshape it. And of course plastics, the reason is it reduces in the fossil fuel use, reduces the need for waste disposal landfills, reference to non-biodegradability of plastic glass. Okay, the reason is उसी को recycle करना चाहिए, बार बार नया मत produce करें, because फिर उसको आप waste नहीं कर सकते, and then that's, you have dumps in the corner areas of city. And don't ask, I live in an area which has a major dump of Lahore, so there are times when we can smell crazy stuff. Okay, and then of course it says specific example of reuse as a method of recycling. Carrier bags, glass bottles. आपको पता है पाकिस्तान में काफी ड्राइव शुरू हुई है जब से ये well, disclaimer, I'm not any pro against PTI, but you know that since the government came, one of the things that they advocated was green environment, which basically meant उन्होंने लिफाफे खत्म कर दिए, plastic bags. And we're, well, I mean, there's still plastic bags here and there, but still we can see that majority of the bakeries and all of that stuff, they're resorting to paper bags or cloth bags. And then reference to composting, reducing animal feed from food waste, and a valid reason. Okay, so it's a general thing. You can give any examples. Again, when I post the notes, you can see all of the examples there. Okay. All right. And then the last example that we're going to see is water pollution. I have some questions for that also. Again, it's a slightly old question, but worth discussing. Describe ways in which farmers can reduce risk of water pollution. Okay. Number one, reference to use of manures, compost, prevent animal sewage entering water source, prevention of, you know, one of the most interesting things I like about this topic is eutrophication. Okay, and I'm sure you know what eutrophication is. जब आपके water body के ऊपर blue green algae बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाती है, and it prevents the light from entering the water, and the water plants, they die, and that also adds to the decomposition process in the water. Oxygen come ho gayi, and I think, if I'm not wrong, this is a topic which has been repeated in chemistry also. So alhamdulillah, this is how it is. Okay, I want to go through the examiner report first before I look at the mark scheme for this question. It says candidates were able to score partial credit since most were aware of the need to be careful in the use of fertilizers to prevent runoff from fields into the water, and somehow to prevent animal sewage or droppings from entering the water. However, it was not realistic to suggest that farms be sited well away from water. There were occasional references to the use of manure compost in place of artificial fertilizers, to crop rotation, and to biological pest control, but the use of degradable pesticide or genetically modified crops was not mentioned. There were some candidates who strayed from the theme and involved industrial wastes, while others gave several examples of actions that farmers should avoid. That's not washing tools. Okay, so I mean, I hope this is a simple, fairly simple enough. I mean, मैं बच्चों को हंसता होता हूँ कि ये this is the non-biological part of your syllabus that we have to go through anyway, and it's a mixture of geography and all of that stuff that you've seen. These are simple theory points that you need to understand. And of course, remember as the first assessment objective, which is remembering some facts. ठीक है जी. So alhamdulillah, this is what the topics are basically all about. Now, very quickly, if I were to skim through the syllabus points, तो आप देखेंगे कि more or less it's all of these points that we've discussed in different past papers. So support movement, locomotion, relationship. ये देखें जी. So it is all of this thing that basically we've discussed today in terms of past papers, of course, uh, यहाँ से लेके यहाँ तक, including ideas of deforestation, effects of humans on the ecosystems, फिर ये आपकी water pollution है, air pollution है, and then conservation है, and then we have recycling. ठीक है? So what I'm going to do is just again for the sake of spoon feeding, इनके notes भी मैं share कर दूंगा. And also, I will share all of these papers that I've just went through very quickly, including their mark schemes and the examiner reports, so that you know what is the content that you need to learn. And the rest of the understanding, of course, I would very strongly encourage कि आप textbook की reading ज़रूर करें इसके लिए, especially if you have the Phil Bradfield textbook. Okay, I usually don't encourage. I mean, it's always encouraged, but I would strongly suggest that you do go through all of this text. I've given you the content you need for the exam, लेकिन आपकी deeper understanding के लिए, I mean, I can't literally go do the textbook reading. It's a lot of time consuming. But again, if there's anything that you don't understand, despite of the fact that I've gone through the past papers and you do the textbook reading, just let me know, inshallah. We will manage some time for this also, inshallah. Yaad rakhein in your syllabus, there are these two portions that are highly, very theoretical. The one is nutrition. Nutrition ka jo shuru wala portion hai, malnutrition, and all of that stuff. And then you have this idea, the last portion of ecology. Anyhow, so now I have some questions ready for you. So we did some questions when we were doing ecology about the trophic levels and the primitive numbers, primitive biomass, carbon dioxide. The ones that I couldn't do was nitrogen cycle, so I managed to find some. And then inshallah, in the rest of the time that we have, we are going to do the MCQs. Okay, so figure 2.1 shows, okay, just give me a second. Okay, Challenging. Figure 2.1 shows part of the nitrogen cycle. Okay, अब आप देख रहे हैं कि they are. Let's go through this diagram. Wait, let me close my one and open it again. Okay, there you go. Acha ji. So if you look at the diagram, you can clearly see the animal. Okay, it's a herbivore. It's eating grass. Then you can see this plant, it's the legume plant, and you can clearly see these are the root nodules, the swellings that you can see. अगर आपको याद हो root nodules में क्या था? Root nodules में we saw that these are special legume plants that have these swellings in the roots which contain some bacteria. You don't need to know the technical name for these bacteria, but we name them on the name of the process that they're doing. And that process is nitrogen fixation, which is basically converting nitrogen gas into ammonium ions. Ammonia, sorry. Not NH4, it's NH3. एक second. Okay. Okay. So ammonia, it converts it into NH3, and of course, when NH3 it dissolves, it becomes aqueous. Then we have ammonium ions, and I'm sure I don't need to go into details of what an ion is. Okay, and then you can see there's this nitrogen in the air. Okay, and it's entering into this plant. So maybe, I mean, this looks like nitrogen fixation. Okay, so we can clearly see that the atmospheric nitrogen is being converted into ammonium ions. Then you can see this is the arrow. Ammonium ions are going back into the atmosphere as nitrogen. And then यहाँ से ammonium ions are being converted into nitrate ions. Okay, so again, this reminds us of some process that we did. So NH4 positive being converted into NO3 minus nitrate ions. And of course, ये जो A label किया हुआ है, animal से कुछ निकल के जा रहा है soil में, or it's becoming the dead organic matter. Okay. Now let's look at the question. Name the processes A and B shown in figure 2.1. Okay, so what is A? That is clearly defecation. बच्चे हंसते होते हैं क्वेश्चन को देख के, मैं उनको कहता हूँ you just look at the arrow and you'll understand that this is defecation. Okay, so this is defecation, which basically means dead organic matter from the feces is basically entering the soil, okay, and which is eventually being converted into ammonium ions. So the answer is defecation for A. And B, I want you to think about it. Nitrogen fixation was the first thing that we saw. That's basically the gaseous form being converted into ammonium ions. But then this process is nitrogen, kya hai ji? Nitrification, which is basically the second step that we saw. I want to quickly go back to the diagram that we did. Nitrogen cycle, there you go. Here, look at this thing. Okay, so that's nitrification. You can clearly see ammonium ions being converted into nitrate ions. Okay, so this process is nitrification. And of course, as I said, you don't need to remember the scientific names of the bacteria, but the names of the bacteria are named according to the process. So B is nitrification. Okay, B part 4 marks. Go ahead. It says figure 2.1 shows legumes have root nodules. So again, you can see the swellings on the roots. Explain why these root nodules are important in the nitrogen cycle. It's a 4-marker question. Okay, बहुत simple hai to answer this question. Now think about it. Let's look at the question. Explain. So you have to give reasonings. Why root nodules are important? What role do the root nodules play in nitrogen cycle? So the first thing that we need to understand that the root nodules, they have nitrogen fixing bacteria. Okay? And what do nitrogen fixing bacteria they do? Nitrogen fixing bacteria, they convert nitrogenous in its gaseous form into ammonium ions, period. इसकी marking जो कि यहाँ पे नहीं है, but उसमें you will get 1 mark for nitrogen fixation and you will get the other mark for nitrogen and the other mark for telling that it's in gaseous form, and then the 4th mark for telling that it's converted into ammonium ions. Okay? So these are the type of questions that basically appear for nitrogen cycle. I'm sure that the flavor, if you like, of the questions that we've seen is quite fairly simple. Ecology की questions इतने मुश्किल नहीं होते. They're easy. The topic itself can get lengthy at times to understand, but again, you can clearly see that especially carbon cycle के जिसके questions काफी ज़्यादा आते हैं और हमने काफी ज़्यादा किए थे. If you understand them as a concept, then you will understand. And really, it has been a case in section B where they've asked you to describe and explain the entire carbon and the nitrogen cycle. I'm not saying that that cannot be asked, but again, it depends. लेकिन जिस तरह की questions हैं वो मैंने आपको दिखा दी. ठीक है जी, चलें जी. So the next thing that we're going to do is basically do the MCQs, and alhamdulillah, then we're done with this topic.